So I asked a friend a while ago, it was a few years ago, who's a Catholic guy, whether he did bonfire night, because I suddenly sort of realised, I don't know why, I suddenly felt conscience-stricken that we would go every year and join in this celebration where we executed a Catholic. And he said it hadn't passed his notice, but they didn't really worry about it too much and got on with it anyway. As the conversation unfolded, I learned that the hokey cokey, the dance that we all did as children, where you dance inwards and outwards, was kind of a Protestant slur on Catholic mass, which I had no idea about. And you begin to realise how, in so many ways in your culture and not just your theology, not just when you're aware you're talking about theological things, your position in the world is being defined against the thing that you're not. So for me, growing up, all things Catholic were a bit suspect, I guess. And my theological spine was shaped against, or in reaction to, what I was told were Catholic beliefs, which actually turned out to be far more complicated than the rough things that were passed down. And now, my world is very, very different. Everybody I know is reading Thomas Merton and Henry Nouwen and Richard Rohr and then all these Catholic mystics, Julian of Norwich, John of the Cross. There's suddenly this wonderful openness where evangelicals and post-evangelicals are drinking from that well. I think there's all kinds of reasons why we found ourselves not only free to do so, but actually kind of needing to do so. There were things that we really realised we didn't have in the realm of spirituality. Actually, I think a lot of Protestantism, because it wanted to stamp out activities by which you appeared to be trying to earn your salvation or something like that, almost rinsed itself of a spirituality. It developed its own in certain ways, but there was this slight impoverishment of spiritual practices. Now I think we sort of found ourselves on this Silk Road of spiritualities where there's the freedom, but also the need to draw on all these other wells. I'm curious and interested about whether that works the other way. Do Catholic people sit around together and read Dietrich Bonhoeffer or what have you? Is there any way in which that goes the other way?
Well, I mean, just speaking of Dietrich Bonhoeffer, I mean, you're certainly speaking to a Catholic who loves Dietrich Bonhoeffer. I found that the inspiration that came from him and so many other within the tradition absolutely mesmerizing. It highlighted the reverse of what you were experiencing. I mean, I was brought up in a Catholic situation where there would be a suspicion of things Protestant. I mean, going back to your original point about talking to the Catholic about the Guy Fawkes Day, the day when the first Passionist, who was making the break from leaving Italy to move to England, which was in 1840s, got off the boat at Dover, and it was the 5th of November, and had no experience at all of sort of like what were all these bonfires doing. And he was Italian, and he was coming in with a funny accent. He didn't speak English very well, so he was confronted from the very first day in England. The English Catholic Church was just emerging in the mid-19th century from, there hadn't been allowed to be any bishops appointed, Catholic bishops appointed, until the mid-19th century. So the shift the other way, where Catholicism was regarded as as subversive as was. It's been a long journey on that one. So what happened at the Reformation was very much needed in terms of the reform that happened, but unfortunately it created a sort of reaction from a Catholic point of view, which was often just as intolerant coming back. So that we've inherited in this country certainly, but not only here, a whole backlog historically of where we're still working through some of that. But in terms of where we are today, I mean, I think that there's a total sea change in terms of a recognition on all sides. I mean, another of my favourite speakers, writers, inspiration now would be Rowan Williams, for instance. So the fact that he's coming from a Protestant background is a strength, because he's bringing the particular insights that come from that, and I welcome that. And I think within any serious group of Catholics today, there wouldn't be any hesitation at all in sort of saying we need to drink from one another's wells and not sort of think that it all comes from our own. But having said that, it doesn't mean to say that a lot of the effects of that sort of split and the way it was handled and mishandled on all sides is still very much with us, and there's still a lot of defensiveness around. So it comes back down to the thing we were talking about earlier about the undertaker midwife. Whichever area you look at, whether it's the ecumenical, the openness to enjoying the fruits of Quaker insights, radical Protestant thinking. I mean, some of the best writing on Scripture has come from the whole Protestant tradition, because certainly when I was growing up, there was a lot less emphasis. It's changed now. But there was a lot less emphasis in the Catholic tradition of needing to know the Scriptures and to learn from them and to make them an important part, because we would have emphasized the sacramental side and the symbolism side. Now, I find it interesting listening to you, David, and sort of saying, well, yeah, perhaps it's an ongoing two-way flow, if you can have a two-way flow, where the strengths of each tradition can enrich the other one. So I would hope that today, those who are active would be working ecumenically rather than separately.
Thinking about the Reformation, partly because it fits into a wider theme. It's interesting to me because of our wider theme of the undertaker and the midwife, more than because we're having a dialogue as a Catholic and a Protestant. It's beautiful to be able to have this dialogue without the faintest
inhibition.
Yeah. I don't think we've either of us got any axe to grind, really. Obviously, the Reformation, 500 years ago, comes alongside so many other changes in terms of the Enlightenment, the development of a sort of capitalist economic model, the sort of the development of European colonial power over other continents in the world, all these kinds of things. And in a way, I feel like many of the things that were set in motion around that, I won't hang it all on the Reformation, but it's one of those elements in the mix, and no doubt made certain things possible. Seems to have sort of come to a messy bookend at the other end, where a lot of those things have come to roost. We're in a place of metanoia, of rethinking, of having to stop and say, we are obliged to rethink everything. Which again is one of the painful, difficult, beautiful, hopeful things about the present.
It is. Yeah, I think it is hopeful. I mean, can I? I mean, as you were talking there, David, I was thinking of one of my a writer I very much admire is Charles Taylor, who's I think he's in his 80s now. He's a Catholic philosopher, Canadian philosopher, and he's written quite a bit. But he would take the analysis of what's happened in the last 500 years, and he'd characterize it saying that 500 years ago, everybody believed in God. They might not have been practicing, they might not have sort of put it into practice, but there was just a presumption that God was there, however confusedly, and whichever side you were coming from. And he said, if you take now the 500 years on, the presumption that God is there has gone for the vast majority of people. And he says it's too simplistic to say it's a straight line. Why has that happened? To say that there's a straight linear line as to why that has happened. And Taylor suggests that it's been a zigzag process, and that various factors, you've touched on some of them already, from the French Revolution to the American Revolution to the Communist Revolution, and these zigzag factors, coupled with the philosophical changes that have been happening, and often the inadequacy of church groups of whichever persuasion to actually find a language and a way of actually becoming an integral part of what was going on, has left us with you would think you were using words like messy or a bookend, or we've arrived at a point where for the vast majority of people, they would say, well, why do we need to even consider the idea about whether there's a God or not? And he would go on to suggest, he says, he says there's no easy answer to it, but he says it does push us back to say that unless we're prepared to re-examine all our, he has created this term, social imaginaries, and he uses the term social imaginary. He says it covers everything. It means all the things, culturally, philosophically, whatever way you want to describe it. What are those social imaginaries that we're not always conscious of, but which in fact dictate and orientate us forward? He said they all need to be put on the table, no easy task, in order for us to start rethinking how do we approach the whole question of, in inverted commas, God, in a way that recognizes that zigzag approach over the last 500 years and puts us in a different position now. And what I find attractive about the way he's placing the larger picture, without trying to put in all the details, is that gives a context in which the sort of conversation you and I are having now, or the conversations that are going on in very many other places, are given a sort of a coherence, are sort of said, well, yeah, that's what we're doing, that's what we're trying to do. But that means, which coming back to your Undertaker midwife bit, have you got to be prepared to I might have said this to you before, Wittgenstein's thing of saying, when you use words, make sure you've first taken them to the dry cleaners, because they accumulate so much dirt, but in other words, they need to be clarified. And it all fits in, whether it's Wittgenstein, whether it's Charles Taylor, or whether it's the general feeling of what's happening in the world today. We're at a very different point of human existence. We're facing huge challenges ecologically, politically, militarily, etc. And unless those things are on the table, then I think that it's right to be nervous and to be afraid. On the other hand, if they are on the table, perhaps we're approaching a point where something wonderful is going to sort of emerge, and we can begin to create that together. So we become co-creators of the way forward, which is different to the way that perhaps where I started from.
One of the strange dynamics I see at work, and I don't really have good language for it, is that the world appears to be becoming more religious and more secular all at once. But those two forces don't seem to be, as in the past, in antagonism. Mm-hmm. Actually, they seem to be permeating each other. So the secular realm feels just more awash in religious language, to the point where the concept of that as a distinct realm almost starts to feel strange. The religious realm seems to be more and more comfortable with drinking from the wells of not just another tradition within the religion, not just another religion, but all kinds of things. All things seem to be growing and mixing together. So I recall being in London at an Extinction Rebellion protest in October 2019. And this fascinating scene, this is obviously, it's very carnivalesque, and there's this incredible mix of, sort of outlooks and affiliations there. And then at one point, there was a row of people with a microphone in Trafalgar Square, just taking it in turns to read a chapter of the book of Revelation. Mm-hmm. And it's not just like a few religious people in a corner. It was, it was the thing that was going on at that time. There's something going on all the time, but that was what was going on for that hour or so. And it's just, it's almost weird. They read the entire book out. They didn't just read this bit or that bit. They read it out, the marvelous bits, the ugly bits. In this environment that wasn't a faith environment, it wasn't not a faith environment. A sort of a naive, younger self would have seen this as, oh, good, the kingdom of God is coming because they're reading the Bible. I would never view it that way. That's not exactly what I think is going on there. I don't think it's some sort of taking of ground for the religious taking ground from the secular. I almost think it's the religious allowing itself to be permeated by the secular. It goes completely both ways. But yeah, I'm not sure what all of the outworkings of that happening. But that moment seemed to be a vision of the complexity and the mixing and the growth that didn't seem to be about winners or losers. It just seemed to be about that Silk Road of spiritualities, everybody drinking from everybody's wells without any need to be a this or a that, or to be a, nobody demanding membership from anybody.
I wasn't there with you on that occasion, but I can really identify with what I think I'm hearing you saying on that. Would you feel that perhaps the fact that you were feeling comfortable with that, and you could feel that things were coming together in a way that they perhaps wouldn't have come together in the past, was an expression of the way that your particular journey has gone? That you've come from a particular sort of tradition with its strengths but also with its potential weaknesses. There's been a progression along the way which has brought you to a point where you can see the paradoxes that you're describing in terms of that, reading the book of Revelations in the middle of an Extinction Rebellion and sort of feel comfortable with. Possibly that illustrates the journeys that perhaps we're all on, but we're all at different stages, and it's not always recognised where we are. We perhaps don't always recognise it ourselves. I feel, for instance, why do I remain committed to the Passionist congregation, for instance, particularly in light of it being as small as it is, and where's it going? Well, it's been my sustaining community over 60 years. It's not always been easy. It's not always been a pleasant ride, but it's been a wonderful one. And I don't see any reason for letting go of that. It might come to an end, but insofar as I've still got any energy and others are around, I would want to remain part of it, while at the same time saying, having had the particular journey that I've been on, I hopefully would feel at home in the Extinction Rebellion, or at home in our conversation now, or at home in wherever I find myself. So I don't feel constrained by my past, but I do feel that there's a strength in still having roots that you can sort of go home to, if that's an expression that the Pope uses in this language. He sort of asks the question in the encyclical I was telling you about, Fratelli Tutti, where he says, where do you feel you belong? And he's not asking the question narrowly, he's asking it in a wide context. But everybody does want to have a sense of belonging, because part of the challenge perhaps of the time we're living in is that a lot of people can feel totally disconnected, can feel totally fragmented and isolated in that sense. So it's how do we rediscover the being at home in with in a family, in inverted commas, not necessarily your own family, that you feel comfortable with, but also being able to go out from the family and be part of this wider thing. And perhaps that's what we're moving towards, not always very clearly.
And that dialectic is a real tension in my world. I have a bit of evangelical, post-evangelical envy of the sense of home that is established by a tradition that manages to sort of flex a bit with change but maintain its kind of identity. When you're a post this or a post that,
Yes.
you're
Yeah.
a sort of ideologically homeless.
Yes.
You're a not that. You've
Yes.
left that house, and
Well, you use that at the beginning of our session. You very clearly sort of did say I'm a post-evangelical, and I must admit, at the back of my mind, I was sort of well, yeah, okay, I respect what you're saying, but I would not be described. At times, I'm tempted to say, am I a lapsed Catholic priest? Because and a lot of people probably think I am. But I don't think I am. I feel I'm more than ever committed to where I've come from, even though I'm asking questions about how that's expressed today, both personally and collectively, in a way that I perhaps didn't before. So do we need to shove the adjective of post on too quickly? Is there still some negotiation there that needs to?
Yeah, I suppose for me the term post, to use it, is to say that you're in a liminal space.
Right. Okay.
You're not.
That's my vestibule bit.
Yes. The post is the vestibule. It's the court
to the Gentiles, which is not. It's not post.
No. It's just. I suppose it's a liminal space in time or in ideological journeys, isn't it? I mean, there's something a bit exilic about that language and that place, and that hurts actually. The song I've referred to, which is the Babel myth, is called Home, and I think it's
right. Interesting.
It's to do with that that there is a pain in leaving the tower.
Yeah.
Because truth compels you to find home scattered in creation, because that's the home you've been given.
Yeah.
And there was something false about your way of designating this bit as home and that bit all to perdition. That had to end. So you got, but the journey of making that home or finding a sense of home and feeling truly at home doesn't happen all at once, does it? For a while, you're going to feel like a wanderer. And I think that's partly why, on this Silk Road of spiritualities, evangelicalism as well as post-evangelicalism has sort of yearned for spiritualities, because it's the lack of a home in practices, in rituals, in shared language, and so on, is felt, and you begin to almost pick up other stories as prototypes for what you might form as a sense of home.
I mean, listen to you describing that little bit of it there. My mind is going to the fact of going back to the Liverpool experience for me, because Austin and I were moving into a very specific community, the community of Toxteth, which is largely characterised by the experience of the black community living in. I love Liverpool, but Liverpool is a very racist city, as many places are. I'm not saying just Liverpool, but it has got a particularly racist history. And to move into that and to gradually begin to find that you were feeling very much at home in that community, because you were the guest coming in, you were the outsider, but was being welcomed, meant that the concept of where was home was subtly changing. It wasn't saying that I, as a white man coming in there, have had the experience that my black friends and neighbours have had, no. But it was saying that I was welcomed as a human being who was walking alongside the community there and was being enriched by them. And then the religious questions, would I describe myself as still Catholic or post-evangelical or whatever, were secondary. They were important, I'm not minimising them, but the important stepping out of the Tower of Babel into Toxteth meant that the experience of actually being alongside one another, mostly with me, it was with a lot with the young people I was working with, that became the central bit. And the rest sort of fell into place as a result of that. Then that puts a different, it comes back down to what I was trying to say earlier on about how the Passionist thing attracted me, because first and foremost it says, tell me where those are at the margins, let's walk alongside, let's walk in support of them, and then we'll work out the theology. And I don't want to dramatize it, but I think that I'm trying to illustrate the tension, the creative tension that can actually bring. And I feel that that's why I'm glad to be a Passionist, because for all our limitations and all our the restrictions, etc., and the things we'd like to do we can't do, it's a good community on which to sort of say, well, okay, that's home, and that'll give you a point of reference, a focus.